I'm Nathan Carter, 45 years old. I live in a small apartment near downtown Austin, Texas, where the window looks out onto the neon lights of South Congress. I make my own coffee every morning, pay my own bills, and run SkillPath, an online platform teaching tech skills to middle-aged workers, people from 40 to 60 years old trying not to be left behind by the digital age. But in the eyes of my old boss, James Thornton, and my former colleagues, I'm still the company's failure. The guy who was expected to become CTO. The smart one. The pride, until I wasn't anymore. I was once set for big success, a brilliant software engineer at a top tech company in Austin. I coded faster than anyone, led million-dollar projects, and was called the one who'll shape the future by James back when he was a close colleague. I was the team's pride, the outstanding one, the bright star, at least until I wasn't. 5 years ago, I left the company, not because of scandal, not because of a fall, just burnout. A quiet burnout that gnawed at me from the inside, making me unrecognizable to myself. The divorce came later, like a final stab, but it was the nights working until 3 in the morning, the pointless meetings, and the pressure to always be perfect that broke me. I still smiled at team meetings, the way I smiled through tough days, but inside, I was empty.
Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video.
When I announced I was leaving, James didn't talk to me for months. He just looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment, and said, "You're giving up, Nathan. You're wasting everything." Colleagues whispered behind my back, spreading stories that I was washed up or living off handouts. Daniel Hayes, my best friend, quietly became the company's new pride, with an MBA, a fancy corner office, and a perfect life. Meanwhile, I started teaching basic tech skills to middle-aged workers at the Austin Vocational Training Center. At first, just a few one-on-one sessions at a hipster coffee shop, helping them learn to send emails or use Excel. I did it for money, to fill my days, but it became something bigger, a purpose. At first, I thought it was failure. Teaching older folks how to click buttons on a computer. That wasn't the grand dream the company expected of me. But then I met Robert, a 50-year-old former factory worker who struggled for 40 minutes to send a job application email. When the email went through, he grabbed my hand, eyes shining, and said, "You brought hope to me, Nathan." Moments like that don't make headlines, don't build fame, but they change lives. From those one-on-one sessions, I started group classes at the vocational center, then built SkillPath, an online platform teaching email, basic coding, digital safety, and how to spot fake news before it spreads across social media. It's not flashy, not a unicorn startup, but it's working. It's changing lives, one step at a time. SkillPath now has 80,000 users, partnerships with Texas vocational training centers, and a mention in a small article in an Austin tech magazine. But James and my old colleagues don't know that. In their eyes, I've stepped off the golden path and wandered into the wilderness. That's okay. I've built my own path, and I'm lighting it for others to follow. But every time I open the former employees group chat, I see a message from James, "Nathan, still busy with that project teaching old folks to click buttons." The group bursts into laughing emojis. In the eyes of James Thornton and my old colleagues, I'm still just teaching old folks to click buttons. At former employee meetups at a tech bar in Austin, James raises a beer and talks about Daniel Hayes, my old best friend, now the CFO. "Daniel's the guy who knows what he wants," he says, voice full of pride. "And Nathan, he's into doing random stuff, right?" The table laughs, and I smile along, cutting a fry on my plate, staying polite. I don't say anything, because that's what failures do. We don't argue, we don't brag, we just keep working. I remember one time, after a meetup like that, I went back to my apartment, sat in the dark, and looked out at Austin's neon lights. I opened my email and read a letter from Clara, a 55-year-old SkillPath user, a former accountant who got laid off. She wrote, "Thanks to SkillPath, I learned to use online accounting software, and started a small business. You gave me a second chance, Nathan." I read that letter over and over, warmth spreading in my chest. SkillPath is growing every day. From group classes at the Austin Vocational Center, we've moved to online workshops, then developed into a platform with over 100,000 users. We just signed contracts with 3 Texas vocational centers, and a big nonprofit from a neighboring state is reaching out to expand the program. I work with Sophie Tran, a young, passionate coder, to improve the platform. We added features like voice-guided instructions, large interfaces for those with poor eyesight, and adaptive quizzes to personalize the learning experience. Once I held a user testing session at the Austin Center. A 58-year-old former mechanic cried when he used Zoom for the first time to call his granddaughter in California. "She thought I was gone," he said, voice trembling. "Now she knows I'm still here." I smiled, patted his shoulder, and felt my heart light up. Moments like that don't make the news, but they're why I keep going. But when I shared that moment at a former employee meetup at the tech bar in Austin, James just smirked. "Teaching old folks to click buttons, real noble," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Daniel Hayes, my old best friend, now CFO, chuckled under his breath. I let it slide. I didn't say anything, just sipped my beer, and smiled, the way I've learned to hide the sting. They don't know that clicking buttons has become a comprehensive educational platform, with adaptive interfaces, voice assist tech, and a 78% open rate for our monthly newsletter. They don't know SkillPath is being piloted in 3 state-run vocational centers. That my little project is changing more lives in a week than their boardroom meetings do in a year. The truth has its own way of finding you, sometimes through someone you've never met. 2 weeks before a big tech conference at the Austin Convention Center, my inbox lit up with a new email. Subject, Laura B. Testimonial Stories of Impact. I clicked. It was a 90-second video, submitted through SkillPath's Stories of Impact campaign, where users or their families share how the platform changed their lives. In the video, Laura Bennett sat in a softly lit room, holding the hand of an older woman, smiling. "This is my mom, Margaret Hayes," she said. "My mom lost her factory job last year, and it left her depressed. But thanks to SkillPath, she learned basic coding and found freelance work. It gave her confidence, and it gave our family our mom back." I paused, my breath catching. Laura didn't know who I was. She didn't know Nathan Carter was SkillPath's founder. She just knew the platform helped her mom, Margaret, a 58-year-old woman, find meaning again. I watched the video twice, then a third time. Margaret looked straight at the camera at the end, and said, "Thank you, Nathan. You helped me feel human again." Her voice trembled, but was full of life. I sat there in my dark apartment, the neon lights of South Congress streaming through the window. I felt a wave of warmth, but also a small sting. Laura had thanked me, publicly, emotionally, for helping her mom reconnect with her family. The tech conference was approaching, and I wasn't sure if I should go. James and Daniel would be there, along with the old colleagues who always saw me as a failure. I imagined them smirking, asking, "Still working on that project, teaching old folks to click buttons," and laughing. Sophie Tran, SkillPath's young coder, urged me to go. "You need to show them what SkillPath is," she said, eyes blazing. "They don't know what you've done." But I hesitated. I didn't want to stand in a room full of spotlights and skeptical eyes, where James would raise a beer and talk about Daniel, while I was just a shadow in the corner. I didn't respond to the conference invite right away. I knew they expected me to show up, smile politely, and stand in the corner like a faded photo. Still there, but easy to overlook. I told myself I'd go, not for James or Daniel, but for Margaret, for Clara, for the people who said I made them feel valued. But inside, I was scared. Scared of James's gaze, scared of the colleagues' laughter, scared of feeling invisible again. I stood up, when I looked at myself in the mirror, wondering if I had the strength to step into that room, not to prove anything to them, but to remind myself that I hadn't failed. I arrived at the Austin Convention Center 10 minutes early, as is my habit. The vast room, dim lighting, and the faint smell of coffee from the service counter gave the space the glamorous air of the tech industry. I chose a seat in the corner, where the light didn't reach, as I always do to remain invisible. The navy suit I wore, simple, elegant, was my quiet statement, but I wasn't sure it was enough to hide the anxiety in my heart. James Thornton, Daniel Hayes, and the old colleagues would be here. The conference began with flashy speeches about artificial intelligence and blockchain. I sat quietly, taking notes on my phone, trying not to draw attention. James and Daniel arrived late, radiant in their expensive suits. James glanced at me, gave a cursory nod, but his eyes carried that familiar look, half pity, half mockery. I smiled, as I had done dozens of times before. The conference dragged on with long-winded speeches about profits and markets. Then that moment came, sudden like a flash of light in the darkness. During the segment on social tech projects, Laura Bennett stepped onto the stage. She was a business partner, with a confident demeanor and a warm voice. She began talking about her mother, Margaret Hayes, a 58-year-old former factory worker. My mom lost her job last year, and it took away her sense of purpose, Laura said, her voice choking. But then she found SkillPath. That platform taught her basic coding, helped her find freelance work. It brought her back to our family. She paused, looking around the room. I want to thank the founder of SkillPath. Is Nathan Carter here? The room fell silent. I felt my heart pounding, like it might burst. I stood up, slowly, feeling the light from the chandeliers shining directly on me. Laura looked at me, eyes wide, mouth slightly agape. You're Nathan Carter, the founder of SkillPath. I nodded lightly. I built it. She covered her mouth, glanced at James, then back at me. You're Nathan Carter, the one behind the Stories of Impact campaign. The room didn't just listen. It seemed to stop breathing. James sat there, holding his coffee cup, motionless. Daniel looked at me, eyes full of astonishment. Laura continued, her voice trembling with emotion. My mom, Margaret, used SkillPath every day until she found a new job. Thanks to you, she video calls our family every week. You gave us more time with her. She paused, looking at me. I sent a video to your campaign. Did you see it? I gave a small smile. I saw it. It meant a lot. Laura stood there, still stunned. Why didn't you say anything? I shrugged. It wasn't time yet. She turned to the room. I don't think people understand. This man built a nationwide program from nothing. SkillPath has been mentioned on NPR, on Forbes. He's changing lives. Whispers spread across the room. An old colleague, Tom, cleared his throat. Daniel stared down at his coffee. James opened his mouth, then closed it, as if struggling for words. Laura went on. I can't believe I'm meeting you. My mom never thought she was smart, until she used SkillPath. She sat down, still looking at me, as if I'd stepped out of a fairy tale. James leaned toward me, voice low. Nathan, I didn't know. I looked at him, calm. You never asked. Silence enveloped the room, but this time it wasn't cold. It was awe. The rest of the conference passed in a strange new light. Colleagues who once mocked me started whispering, not behind my back, but toward me. One patted my shoulder saying, I've got to read up on SkillPath. James sat quietly, as if trying to rearrange the story in his head. Daniel texted me later. I didn't know, Nathan, I'm sorry. I didn't reply right away. Not out of anger, but because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt like the headline, not because I demanded it, not because I interrupted, but because the truth had walked into the room and refused to stay silent. I stood up to give a short speech at the organizer's request. SkillPath isn't about fame, I said, voice steady. It's about helping one person find hope, one step at a time. That's what we do. The room applauded, not loudly, but sincerely. I looked at James, saw him clapping, slowly, as if seeing me for the first time. I didn't need him to be proud. I didn't need him to apologize. But in that moment, as the truth shone, I knew I hadn't failed. I had done something greater than they ever imagined. My phone lit up with a text from Daniel Hayes, my old best friend, now CFO. I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't know. A short message, no excuses, no emojis. I looked at it for a while, then set the phone down. I didn't reply right away, not out of anger, but because I needed time to process this feeling. James texted too, just one line, we need to talk. I didn't reply to him, not out of pride, but because I didn't know what he'd say, and I didn't want to give him a chance to diminish that moment. Not this time. All that day, my phone kept buzzing. Old colleagues, the ones who mocked that project teaching old folks to click buttons, sent messages asking about SkillPath. One, Tom wrote, just read the Forbes article on SkillPath, didn't know it was you. A major Texas nonprofit reached out, wanting to partner to bring SkillPath to rural communities. Sophie Tran, my young coder, called, voice bursting with excitement. Nathan, the whole world's talking about you. See, I told you. James invited me to meet a few days later at a small coffee shop in South Congress, where the smell of roasted coffee mingled with indie music. He sat there, in a suit less ostentatious than usual. His eyes different. "Nathan," he said, voice low. "I was wrong. I thought you gave up, but you did something I never dared. You built something meaningful." I looked at him, not speaking right away. I remembered the times he called me a failure, the times he mocked SkillPath, but I also saw sincerity in his eyes, a rare thing from someone who lived for prestige. "Thanks," I said, simply. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his pride, but those words, though late, still brought a sense of relief. SkillPath kept growing. We just signed a contract with the Texas Library System to offer free courses for middle-aged workers in rural areas. An email from a user, Henry, 60 years old, made me pause. He wrote, "Thanks to SkillPath, I learned to use Zoom to call my granddaughter in Florida. She calls me a superhero. Thank you, Nathan, for making me feel like I still matter." I read that email in my apartment, the neon lights of South Congress streaming through the window. I didn't need fame. I needed moments like that, stories like Henry's, to remind me that every quiet effort matters. The truth, once it speaks, never returns to the shadows. After the conference, SkillPath wasn't just a platform anymore. It became a movement. We launched a nationwide campaign called Skills for All Ages, rolling out workshops at public libraries, vocational centers, and free programs for veterans and underserved rural communities. SkillPath reached 300,000 users, a number I never dared dream of when I started with one-on-one sessions in a South Congress coffee shop. An email from Ellen, 62, in Montana, left me speechless. She wrote, "Thanks to SkillPath, I applied for a passport online. I'm about to fly to see my granddaughter for the first time. I've never been on a plane before. Thank you for giving me that first step." I read that email multiple times, not to seek recognition, but to remind myself that every quiet effort has value. I sent a small gift to Laura Bennett, privately, no press. It was lifetime access to SkillPath, free, for the vocational center, where her mom Margaret studied, along with a long-term tech support team. I included a short note. "Some connections go beyond misunderstandings. Thank you for helping me find my voice again." Laura called me the next morning, voice choking over the phone. "You didn't have to do that," she said. I smiled. "I know. That's why I did. No one knew about that gift. No press release. No recognition. But that's how I wanted it. Quiet, sincere, like SkillPath itself." One evening, I walked to the Austin Bridge, the air cool with the smell of earth and asphalt after rain. The city sparkled under neon lights, as if pausing, waiting for something to break open. I stood there, thinking of Laura, of how she looked at me with respect, not for fame, but for impact. I thought of the years I shrank myself, believing James and my colleagues' silence meant I wasn't enough. But now I know better. I don't need their recognition to feel enough. The truth has spoken for itself, through stories like Margaret's, Clara's, and Ellen's. A few weeks later, Laura invited me to lunch, not as Daniel's friend, but as Nathan Carter, the founder, the one who built something from ashes, and dared to call it beautiful. We met at a sunlit coffee shop in Austin's Capitol Hill. Laura was prepared, a notebook open with notes and figures. "I work with a fund that supports social startups, especially those led by women and pioneers," she said. I showed them your work. She slid the notebook toward me, filled with potential connections and funding numbers. "If you're ready to scale, I think we can help." I didn't blink. "You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "This isn't debt. This is belief. You gave my mom something I couldn't. I just want to see how far your light can go." At a later former employee meetup, James introduced me to some new faces. "This is Nathan. He runs a nationwide program," he said, his voice unpretentious, but sincere. Not a perfect label, but a start. Afterward, he pulled me aside, coffee in hand, eyes full of emotion. "You always took your own path," he said. "I used to think you were lost. Now I see you were just ahead." We didn't hug, but we stood together longer than ever before. And that was enough. I taped a quote to my apartment fridge. "They'll call you a failure until they ask how you did it." No signature, no bitterness, just truth. And in the reflection of the fridge door, I saw myself smiling, not for someone else, but for me. Because this time the light didn't come from others. It was always mine. The story of Nathan Carter and my boss said I failed. Then my boss looked at me and said, "You're the founder," reflects the pressures and cultural values of today's American society, where success is often measured by fame, money, and status, especially in tech hubs like Austin, Texas. Nathan, a 45-year-old software engineer, abandoned a glamorous career due to burnout and divorce, choosing to build SkillPath, a platform helping middle-aged workers learn digital skills. He faced ridicule from his old boss, James Thornton, and colleagues, who saw him as a failure for leaving the traditional path. Yet the moment Laura Bennett recognized Nathan at the conference, revealing SkillPath's impact on her mother, Margaret, shifted everyone's perspective, affirming the value of quiet efforts. Nathan's journey, from feeling invisible to finding liberation, mirrors the pressure to succeed in America's competitive culture, while highlighting the importance of personal meaning. In American society, where success is often defined by external milestones like James, a CEO with a flashy office, you may feel overlooked if you choose your own path. Like Nathan with SkillPath, stay committed to your purpose, even if it's not immediately recognized. Moments like Clara finding hope through her small business, or Henry calling his granddaughter via Zoom, remind us that real impact comes from helping others, not fame. Don't wait for validation from people like James. Trust your worth, as Nathan did on the Austin Bridge, realizing he didn't need anyone to define him. In real life, focus on what brings meaning, however small, because those quiet bricks will build your legacy. If the story of SkillPath's quiet journey and triumph has touched you, subscribe to explore more meaningful stories. Thank you for being here, and see you in the next video, where we keep lighting new paths.